Ruth Berman Harris. I am Jill Goldwright, very proud member of PJTC and rabbinical student, and I'm very, very honored to be with you celebrating Shabbat this evening. You know, it's a really interesting thing being both a teacher and a student,
Rabbi John Carrier,
which is what I am.
Not Cantor Ruth Berman Harris. I am Jill Goldwright.
There's a little bit of feedback. We're just going to wait and see what's happening with that.
That was my bad. Sorry. It's done now.
All right, cool. No problem. Shabbat Shalom again. Some of you know that I'm a teacher and also a rabbinical student, and I love that in between, that interesting stage of being both the master of some information and being a wide-eyed student of some other information. And very, very often those paths cross. And I think about that a lot when thinking about the service. And so tonight, as we're going through our service, we're going to have a little bit of a different focus than what we normally do in a regular Shabbat. It's going to be a regular Shabbat, but instead of kind of going through the service by rote and just going through everything that we go through normally step by step, we're going to stop and linger over certain lines, certain words, and certain verses, and see if we can dig a little bit deeper into our knowledge of all of the gifts that our tradition has to offer. So we'll begin in the very traditional way with Shalom Aleichem. If you're following along in the Sim Shalom, that appears on page 13. And Shalom Aleichem is our moment to welcome the angels of Shabbat. And the angels of Shabbat can be for you whatever those angels mean. I mean, certainly there's a traditional understanding of the cherubim or the angels, but you could also think about just the angel of rest, the angel of blessing, the angel of taking a break, the angels that live among us in our families and in our communities. All of those are legitimate ways to think about the divine presence that comes upon us with every Shabbat. So please join me with Shalom Aleichem on page 13. Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon. Mi Melech, Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Bochem leShalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon. HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Baruchuni leShalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon. Mi Melech, Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Seirchem leShalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon. Mi Melech, Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Lai, 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 Shalom, Malachei Elyon. Mi Melech, Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. As we light the Shabbat candles, Please gather in, whether you're in the room or whether you're in the Zoomiverse out there somewhere. Please gather in the light, the warmth, the sanctity of our community as we light the candles together. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu lehadlik ner, shel Shabbat. Normally at this time in the service, we go through a lot of different psalms and sing and rejoice in the festival of Shabbat. Tonight, I'm going to focus on one psalm, and it's in fact the only psalm that exists in the whole body of 150 psalms that mentions Shabbat. That's Mizmor Shir. So we're going to be focusing on Mizmor Shir, and as a preamble to Mizmor Shir, we're going to be focusing on Lecha Dodi. Lecha Dodi is also a typical Shabbat moment. That is to say that it really focuses on the joy and the wonder that Shabbat brings. As you know, Lecha Dodi is a pretty long prayer. We're going to narrow it down a bit and just do a deep dive into the first and the last verses of the prayer, because I want you to just take a moment and linger over those words. So Lecha Dodi appears in the Siddur on page 21 to 22, and we are going to be making that jump from 21 to 22. But if you'll just give me a moment, I'd like for us to talk about what Lecha Dodi even means and what it's about. So we sing many times in the prayer, we sing the line, Lecha Dodi likrat kala, penei Shabbat nekabala. What does it mean? Well, there are different translations in English. There's the one in our Siddur, which says, "Come, my beloved, with chorus of praise. Welcome Shabbat the bride, queen of our days." Quaint little poem. If we took it out of the poetic form and put it into maybe different language, it might be translated this way: Beloved, come to meet the bride. Beloved, come to greet Shabbat. And this could be any beloved you're thinking of in this moment. It could be your partner or spouse. It could be your child, your parent, your friend, anybody who's in your heart as we enter Shabbat. That's your beloved. So we're going to sing the chorus, and I want you to kind of just think of that. Verse 1, the Shamor v'Zachor verse, is translated in our Siddur as well. Keep and remember were uttered as one by our Creator beyond comparison. I found a couple of other translations that I really like. Keep and remember, a single command the only God caused us to hear. The eternal is one, God's name is one, glory and praise are God's presence. I'll ask you tonight to not only think about how you keep Shabbat and remember Shabbat, but how Shabbat keeps you. and you carry that with you into singing the first verse. And then we're going to jump all the way to the end of the prayer. We're not going to change melodies or anything. We're going to stick with the same melody. And we're going to talk about the last verse, which is where we stand. If you're comfortable, please rise and welcome the Shabbat presence through the door. And what we're doing is we're welcoming this presence, welcoming the presence. I brought in a different translation besides the one in the Siddur, just one for you to think about. Enter in peace, soulmate. Enter in gladness, enter in joy. Come to the people who keep its faith. Enter, O bride. Enter, O Shabbat presence. So I hope you'll join me in Lecha Dodi, starting on page 21. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, yalalai, 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 ne Shabbat, ne kabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, yalalai, 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 ne Shabbat. Nekabela Shamor v'zachor b'dibur echad Hishmianu el hameyuhad Adonai echad u'shmo echad Leshem Tiferet ulifilao Lecha Dodi likrat kala Yalalai, yalalai, yalalai Ne Shabbat, ne kabela Lecha Dodi likrat kala Yalalai, yalalai, yalalai Ne Shabbat, ne kabela. Please rise if you feel comfortable. Boi v'shalom, ateret bala, gam b'mishcha u'zohala, toch emunei am segula. Boi chala, Lecha Dodi likrat kala, yalalai, 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 ne Shabbat, ne kabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, yalalai, 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 ne Shabbat. Nekabela. So Mizmor Shir is the only one of the 150 psalms that mentions Shabbat. And after we sing the first line, Mizmor Shir LeYom HaShabbat, that is the psalm that is written for the day of Shabbat, the next word is Tov. Tov means good. It's good for us. It's good for God. And so there's this kind of beautiful cyclical idea. We express thanks to the Holy One who takes us from one mindset of the week to the elevated mindset of Shabbat. And if you've ever looked at the English of the psalm, there's lots of musical mentions in the text. It talks about the harp and it talks about the lyre. There is a Hasidic tale which says that the way that King David was able to compose all 150 of these amazing psalms was that at night when he slept, his harp hung above his bed. And as the wind blew through the strings of the harp, the notes entered his ear, and he was able to write all of these psalms. I love that story too because the word for wind in Hebrew is ruach, which is also the word for spirit and the word for breath. So all of this kind of comes together and blows through our ears as we sing. We're going to focus on one particular line, which is my favorite line in this psalm. And the line is in Hebrew, Ma gadlu ma'asecha Adonai, me'or amku machshevotecha. I want to share with you what that means. Our Siddur says it means, how vast your works, Adonai. Your designs are beyond our grasp. What a line. Your designs are beyond our grasp. Another translation that I read in preparation for tonight is, how great are your works, O God. Your thoughts are very deep. Let's just linger over that line as we sing Mizmor Shir. So we're going to sing the chorus, and then we're going to jump to that wonderful line, Ma gadlu ma'asecha Adonai. And I hope you'll join me if you're following along in the Sim Shalom. It's on page 23.
מזמור שיר ליום השבת, טוב להודות לאדוני ולזמר לשמך עליון, ולזמר לשמך עליון. Again. מזמור שיר ליום השבת, טוב להודות לאדוני ולזמר לשמך עליון, ולזמר לשמך עליון. מה גדלו מעשיך אדוני, מאור עמקו מחשבותיך. מה גדלו מעשיך אדוני, מאור עמקו מחשבותיך. La 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 la. מזמור שיר ליום השבת, טוב להודות לאדוני ולזמר לשמך עליון, לזמר לשמך עליון, לזמר לשמך עליון.
Please rise in body or in spirit and join me on Baruch Hu, which appears on page 28 of the Siddur. Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Leolam Vaed. Please continue silently on page 28. Baruch atah Adonai Hama'ariv Aravim. The word Shema is a command. It means hear. It also means listen. We hear a lot of stuff, especially over the work week, right? You're listening to the radio, or watching the news, you're checking your phone. If you're like me, you receive 10 calls a day from my personal best friend, Scam Likely, who leaves endless messages that I hear, but I don't listen to most of it. Most of it kind of goes in one ear and out the other. But this is a commandment. It's a command. It says, hear, O Israel. Listen, O Israel. And that's why oftentimes many people have the tradition of covering their eyes when they recite the Shema, so that by closing off one sense, they can heighten or elevate another sense. Some people, especially in this kahal, will make a shin with their fingers to cover their eyes. Shin also being the letter to represent God, Shaddai. So whatever works for you, I hope that you'll join me. But do, if you're comfortable, close off your visual field and elevate your aural field as we recite the Shema together. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. The Ve'ahavta appears on page 30. We're going to chant aloud the first section, and then I hope you'll read silently, and we'll pick it up again on page 31. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha bechol levavcha uvechol nafshecha uvechol meodecha vehayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavcha hayom al levavecha Veshinantam levanecha vedibarta bam beshivtecha vetecha uvleftecha vaderech ushofbecha uvkumecha uchartam leot al yadecha vehayu letotefot beinenecha Uktavtam al mezuzot beitecha uvisharecha. Leman tiskeru vasitem et kol mitzvotai vitem kadoshim leloechem ani Adonai Elohehem asher hotzeiti etchem meretz Mitzrayim liot lachem lelohim ani Adonai Elohehem Adonai Elohechem emet. So for many of us, sitting in a Shabbat service, either in the sanctuary or at home, is the first time that we've had the chance to literally sit and breathe all week. And that's by design. We have to stop the pace, we have to slow way down, we have to take some deep breaths, and we have to reflect a little bit on the past week. I don't think it's a coincidence that for every single Shabbat, we read from the Shirat Hayam, which is the Song of the Sea, about the Israelites, and they're traveling through the desert, and they're finally kind of reaching dry land after crossing the Red Sea. And I want you to just think about that metaphorically for a second, and think about your own deserts, your own midbar. What is your wilderness? What has been your struggle this past week? How does the rest that you're going to attain this weekend help you to face that midbar or that desert? And how are you going to make it to the other side? That's what I love about singing Mi Chamocha every week, because it just gives us the opportunity to revisit that whole idea. So I hope you'll join me for Mi Chamocha on page 32. We're going to use the same melody that we started with this evening for our opening nigun, which is the tune to Sanctuary. And so I hope you'll join me with the words of Mi Chamocha.
Lie, 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 lie. Oh, mi chamocha, baili Madonai, mi chamocha, nedar bakodesh norah. Tehilot, Osef Elem, O mi chamocha, Paelim, Paelim, Adonai, mi chamocha, Nedar, Nedar bakodesh. Oh, lie, 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 lie. La 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 la. Malchutecha ra'uvanecha bokeam lifnei Moshe. Ze'eli, Ze'eli, anu ve'ameru. Adonai yimloch, Adonai yimloch, le'olam va'ed. Venemar kifad Adonai el Yaakov uvalo meir chazak mimenu. Baruch atah Adonai Gal Yisrael. Hashkivenu is about the feeling of being sheltered. If you ask my daughter Allegra, she talks about the feeling of being cuddled. I don't actually think it's that different. The idea of having these wings or this shelter
or this Sukkot Shlomecha, this covering, these wings, this warmth, this wrapping, a feeling of being in a talit. All of this is the kind of feeling that we get from singing Hashkivenu. And when we think about this kind of covering or this canopy, I want you to just think about what your canopy is. Is it your bedroom, where you get to stare at that same old crack in the ceiling, but you look at it as you fall asleep? Or is it the night sky filled with stars? Or is it the tall tree canopy of a forest? Just put yourself there. And that feeling of shalom, of peace, is what we're trying to attain for ourselves, for our community, and for all the world as we pray the Hashkivenu. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu leshalom, leshalom. V'hamidenu malkeinu lechayim. Ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha, ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha. Amen. Shelter us beneath thy wing, O Adonai. Guard us from all harmful things, O Adonai. Keep us safe throughout the night, till we wake with morning's light. Teach us, God, wrong from right. Amen. Shelter us beneath thy wing, O Adonai. Guard us from all harmful things, O Adonai. Keep us safe throughout the night, till we wake with morning's light. Teach us, God, wrong from right. Amen. 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 As we go into our silent Amidah, we're going to go back to our little leitmotif of the sanctuary melody for just a moment as a little preamble. And then from there, I'm going to ask you to daven the Amidah in a way that makes you the most comfortable. Please rise if you are able or comfortable. Please use the words of the Siddur, or please listen to that little spark inside of you and have a moment with that as we pray the Amidah together. If you are using the Siddur, the Amidah begins on page 41b, and the little preamble is in the English that you'll probably recognize. May the words of my mouth, meditations of my heart be acceptable to you, Yah, my rock and redeemer. Oh, say shalom, shalom in Roma. Uya say shalom, Aleinu. Ve'akol Israel Me'imru. Amen. Uya say shalom, Aleinu ve'akol Israel. Amen, amen. Oh, say shalom, shalom imromav. Uya say shalom, Aleinu ve'akol Israel ve'imru. Amen. Ve'akol Israel. Amen. So we've spent much of this Shabbat focusing on teaching and learning, on taking a break from what we often do by rote in order to stop, ask questions, and explore the very benchmarks of our tradition and practice. So tonight, instead of focusing on this week's Torah portion and providing commentary upon it, I would like to take a step back and talk about the Torah as a whole. If I were to ask an average modern Jew if they believe in the Bible, if they think the Torah was literally written by God, or if they think that the events of the Bible are absolutely true, I suspect that a large number would answer in the negative. Furthermore, and this may surprise you since I introduced myself as a rabbinical student, I would also answer no. I have felt many of the same doubts about the Bible being confusing, contradictory, or just plain wrong sometimes. That's difficult to admit about what is supposed to be our very holiest of texts. We face and bow before an open ark, and we carry the Torah around the shul so people may touch it, kiss it, adore it. We dance around on Simchat Torah, partying like we're crazy, cradling the Torah scrolls like babies. And why do we do that if we don't actually believe that any of it is true? If we're being totally honest, the facts in the Bible just don't line up. In fact, there are all kinds of famous episodes in the Bible that don't seem to make any sense. Let's begin with the reality that there are two shockingly different creation stories in the first chapters of Genesis. Is Adam created with the animals, as is described in Genesis 1, or is he formed from the dust of the earth, as posited in Genesis 2? What about Eve? Is she created simultaneously as human, or is she created from Adam's rib? These stories exist side by side in the Hebrew Bible, but they aren't even close. So what's with the inconsistencies? Modern scholars I have learned from point out other discrepancies within the Torah's family trees. Israel Finkelstein and Neil Asher Silberman highlight the totally non-scientific account of the extraordinarily long lifespans of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, which all far exceeded 100 years. Later, they explain that the actual writing of the stories about the patriarchs actually happened centuries after they are purported to have lived. So there's not a high probability of the facts being recorded in any kind of a precise way. But Finkelstein and Silberman explain that we should read the patriarchal narrative primarily as a literary attempt to redefine the unity of the people of Israel, rather than as an accurate record of the lives of historical characters living more than a millennium before. They also say it was the power of legend that united the patriarchs in a manner far more powerful and timeless than the fleeting adventures of a few historical individuals herding sheep in the highlands of Canaan could ever have done. What they argue is that the Bible being factual is not the concern. Here's another shocker for you. Remember the story of Joshua, the great biblical Hebrew who took over from Moses, plundering his way across Canaan, reigning victorious over all its peoples to clear the way for the Jews to inherit the promised land? Remember learning about how Joshua blew his horn and brought down the walls of Jericho? Well, guess what Finkelstein and Silberman tell us about this tale? Contemporary archaeology reveals that the princes of the Canaanite cities, who were described in the book of Joshua as really powerful enemies, were in actuality pathetically weak. And get this, there were no city walls. The formidable Canaanite cities described in the conquest narrative were not protected by fortifications. See, it's a lot easier to write a story about knocking down walls than to actually do it. So the skeptics are right. In many ways, the Torah and the Bible can be viewed as absurd or not historically accurate at all. So now we have to ask, what are we even doing here? Right? If we wanted to read a work of fiction, we would stick with J.K. Rowling or Stephen King. If we wanted to learn more about ancient texts, We'd probably reach for Plato or a Greek tragedy. Why is the Bible, this 2,000-year-old text, which isn't even true, still a bestseller in the 21st century? And on a more spiritual and personal level, if we admit to ourselves that the Bible isn't historical, haven't we lost our way? Allow me to suggest that the Torah doesn't have to be factual to be true. You have the permission of every rabbi who ever lived to question it, prod it, unlock its inconsistencies, conflicts, and confusions. Our tradition implores us to do just that. We're not to allow the truths of the text to wash over us in a purely faithful or utterly uncritical way. Allow me to suggest that there is a difference between archaeology, between accuracy, and between real. A difference between fact and metaphor, between history and memory. Further, let me assure you that metaphors and memories can reveal deep realities and truths. So here's what's real. Every Shabbat all over the world, in every city, country, and continent where there are Jews reading Torah, all of those Jews are learning together. Now more than ever, we know that we are not physically or geographically together, but that's not what I'm talking about. We Jews are diverse in almost all possible ways. We speak different languages, live in different hemispheres, eat, dress, love, and pray differently. But every Shabbat, we are bound by one common thread, and that is the Torah. It does not matter whether most Jews even understand a word of the portion that is being chanted. They can read a translation in a Chumash. They can search their ears for the one word they remember from Hebrew school, or they can zone out and sit with their own thoughts. But they are learning, participating, praying along with Jews all over the world. They will never meet most of those Jews, but they know them because on a very intimate level, they are the same. Regardless of how much of the actual language they can decode, they can feel it, and they will learn from that experience, and that learning will be true. Here's what's real. Every Pesach, we tell and retell a story that probably has no historical precedent at all. We are pretty darn sure that the Red Sea didn't part and that the 10 plagues did not fall upon Egypt as the story suggests. But even Jews who don't know that we sing from the Shirat Hayam in every service will recount this very story to their children. Why? If it's not real. Some Jews recount the story because their grandparents did, and keeping up the tradition honors their ancestral line. Some will do it to create a loose framework around the consumption of large quantities of matzo ball soup. But I think there is more to it than that. The examples I just stated aren't compelling enough for Jews to perpetuate this tradition for millennia. The reason we tell the Exodus story every year without fail is because we all live in our own Mitzrayim. We have all felt the subjugation of slavery in some way. Probably not literally, but maybe emotionally or in our relationships. We have all been the master. We have all been the slave. We have misused our power. We have suffered when others have misused theirs. We have all been the four children, sometimes simple, sometimes wicked, and sometimes wise. We tell the story because it is a universal story, and its significance deepens when we remember that it was written for us. We are proud of being the protagonists of this great saga, the enslaved, the sojourners, the victors, and then the learners. The pride in tradition and ownership, that is true. So what is more important about the past than facts? The answer is memory, because that memory belongs to us. It is our history. Philip Davis continues to this idea by saying, to put it bluntly, the shape and survival of Judaism over the last 2 millennia owes very little to whether history lies behind the biblical narrative, but a great deal to the telling of stories about that past. Here's what's real. You know that people have suffered and perished in the millions for their dedication to the Torah and its people. We know that our ancestors risked everything they had to seek out a life where they could breathe free and pray the way they chose. Some of those Jews knew Torah as intimately as they knew their own heartbeats. Some could not read, ask, or ponder its messages at all. But they carried the Torah's metaphorical meaning with them across oceans, over deserts, and into death camps. Over the centuries, the Torah has been socially dangerous, actually illegal, and sometimes a harbinger of certain death. But they did not betray it, burn it, or abandon it. They carried it with them so that you and I could talk about this today. And that is real. And this conversation is real. This moment is real. Our doubts and our provocations are real. It is only through questioning that we may get a little closer to understanding our human condition. No one is really sated by knowing only the facts. We pursue a deeper understanding of ourselves, our experiences, and what they mean. Our questions bring us a little bit closer to that tonight. Let's talk about this again sometime. Shabbat Shalom. We're going to move into our concluding prayers. So please rise in body or in spirit for Aleinu, which appears on page 51 of the Siddur. Aleinu l'shabeach ladon hakol, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו חיי הרצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו ככם, וגורלנו כהמונם. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. We'll continue with the very two bottom lines on page 51. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו Even in our moments of joy and our days of festival, we pause to remember our loved ones who are no longer with us. Our congregation pauses to remember the yard sites of the congregants and their families whom we love. I will read those names, and I hope you will add to that list anybody whom you are holding in your heart. On this Shabbat, we remember Anna Friedenberg, Bernice Feldstein, David Kristen, Estelle Greenblatt, Eva Schneiderman-Katz, Jean Slater, Jerry Sirota, Gertrude Bunitsky, Goldie Ida Gordon, Gregory Frey, Greta Winter, Harry Cause, Henya Seitlin, Howard Finn, Howard Lassman, Julian Snyder, Leonard Goss, Louis M. Whitkin, Miriam Dinnerman, Nathan A. Witt, Peter Silverman, Philip Carr, Richard Goodman, Roselle Schlachter, Ruth Anderson, Ruth Fierst Lehman, Ruth Kaplan, Shimon Wittman, Shui I. Greenberg, Antonia Sugarman. We also will recite Kaddish this evening for those who have no one present to do so for them. The Mourner's Kaddish appears on page 52. Please rise if it is your custom. And please raise your voices and your spirits so those who are mourning in our community will feel your support and your friendship. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbah, be'almam divrachute v'yamlich malchute, v'chayachon uvyomechon v'chaye dechol beit Yisrael, ba'agala uvizman kariv, v'yimru, Amen. Yehi shmei rabbah mevarach le'alam umei almaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach, v'yitba'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yithadar v'yithaleh v'yithalal shemei dekudasha, brichu. Leila min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbachata v'nehemata, dami ram be'alma v'yimru. Amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'yimru. Amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'yimru. Amen. May the memories of those you hold in your hearts be for a blessing this Shabbat and all the days of your life. I have some announcements that I was asked to read. So first of all, I just want to give a very special thank you to Matt for keeping me on track tonight. Really, your playing just reminds me of the harp hanging above David's bed. So thank you so much for that. For all upcoming events, please make sure that you check the e-blast, which comes out on Thursdays, for the links. But just a couple of reminders. After this Shabbat on Sunday, July 11th at 10 a.m., there's the Social Justice Committee meeting. There's the meditation group, which meets on Tuesday mornings at 8:45. On Wednesday, July 14th, there is an 8 p.m. Pirkei Avot discussion group. And on Thursday morning, the 15th at 10 a.m., Rabbi Jason Mann is leading the Exploring Your Life Through Torah class. And then, of course, next weekend, starting on Friday, July 16th, our Shabbat service will again be in person and online, depending on wherever you want to be to join us. I hope that you will. Okay, so you know the leitmotif, what we've been kind of establishing all evening long, is the sanctuary melody. And this time we're actually going to sing the sanctuary song as our closing song first in English, then in Hebrew. I hope you'll raise your voices, even if you're at home in the living room, raise your voices and create a sanctuary wherever you are. Oh Lord, prepare me to be a sanctuary, pure and holy, tried and true. With thanksgiving, I'll be a living sanctuary for you. Now you know the words. I want you to join me. Lord, prepare me to be a sanctuary, pure and holy, tried and true. With thanksgiving, I'll be a living sanctuary for you. Ve'asuli mikdash ve'shachanti betocham v'anachnu nevarech Yah me'ata ve'ad olam. Lai, 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 one more time. Lord, prepare me to be a sanctuary, pure and holy, tried and true. With thanksgiving, I'll be a living sanctuary for you. Shabbos. All right, we are going to do our concluding prayers. So we'll begin with the washing of the hands, and feel free at home to join in. Otherwise, join me kind of vicariously, digitally, and I'll say the prayer on behalf of the Kahal. Where did I put it? Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Asher, oh my goodness, help me guys. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav, tzivanu al netilat yadayim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen l'chaim. And the challah, which I hope you'll also join with me, whether you're in the sanctuary or at home. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz, Shabbat Shalom. Thank you so much for joining us. Shabbat Shalom.